Hello, and welcome to Intermediate Accounting 2, also known as Accounting 311. My name is Molly Carpenter, and I will be your instructor for this class. The next few slides are intended to give you an overview of the class and what you can expect, and then at the end we'll do a little bit of a tutorial around LEO and where you can find some important course resources. Let's first start by giving you an introduction about myself. So as I mentioned, my name is Molly Carpenter. I am a certified public accountant in the state of Maryland, which is also where I reside. This is my 5th year teaching for UMUC, which is now actually University of Maryland Global Campus, or UMGC. Primarily, I teach hybrid classes at the Shady Grove campus in Maryland. But I have taught some of the accounting classes online, and I'm excited to kind of get back into the online teaching environment. My day job is with Marriott International. I work in their financial reporting and analysis group, and my focus within that position is really on balance sheet and cash flow reporting. And specifically, I do all of our equity reporting and all of our EPS reporting. And those are two topics that we will spend quite a bit of time talking about in week 2 of the class. I've been with Marriott for about 7 years. And before that, I was in public accounting at Ernst & Young. I was actually in their Minneapolis office. And I spent time auditing a variety of different companies, including Hormel Foods, U.S. Bank, Ameriprise Financial, Target, and ING. So you'll notice throughout this course I'll sprinkle in some of my experiences with some of those companies. I also have some experience working at a small CPA firm doing personal taxation or personal tax returns. And then I also spent some time at a manufacturing firm when I was still in college. And in addition to having spent the last 5 years teaching at UMGC, when I was doing my master's degree at the University of Iowa, I was also an accounting lecturer. So that kind of also segues into my education. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting from the University of Iowa. I also have a master's of accounting from the University of Iowa. And then several years later, I went back to school again and received a Master's of Taxation, or a Master's of Business Taxation, at the University of Minnesota. So that's a little bit about me. And then I also just wanted to go over some contact information. So my email address is listed in the slides. You can reach me at my email address. There also may be times where you need to contact me via phone. So I've listed my phone number. Feel free to text me anytime, although I can't necessarily guarantee that I will, respond right away. And then I think I mentioned I live in Maryland, so I'm on Eastern Standard Time. And the beauty of an online class is that it allows people to be, all over the U.S. or all over the world. And so my kind of contact hours in terms of getting a hold of me via phone are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Additionally, as needed or, on a person-by-person basis, if need be, we can set up a phone call, we can have a Skype session, a FaceTime meeting. If that's necessary, I'm happy to set that up. The one thing I do ask is that you really think about and be cognizant of what's the best means of communication to get a hold of me. And what I mean by that is, if you have a question on a homework assignment or a question on the lecture slides, right, it may be best to, shoot me an email and kind of explain what your problem or your question is so that I kind of have the background, and then maybe we set up a phone call or a Skype session, or maybe it's something that I can easily answer, via email, right? It's probably not going to be the most advisable method to text me, and ask me all these questions about your homework, right? Because it's not going to be very easy for me to respond via text. Now, on the other hand, if you're working on a quiz and all of a sudden your power goes out and you're not going to be able to turn it in on time, that's sort of a more urgent matter. you would be absolutely appropriate, to shoot me a text to tell me what the situation is, and then we can kind of handle it from there. So just as you would kind of tailor your communications in other aspects of your life, make sure that you're kind of thinking about the best way to get a hold of me depending on what the situation is. So next I want to go over just a little bit of a course overview and tell you a little bit about what this course is going to cover. So most of you probably very recently would have taken Intermediate Accounting 1. That's also a course that I teach. And that class really focused primarily on the foundation and the fundamentals of financial accounting, and then a lot of asset topics. So you'd went over cash and inventory and accounts receivable and plant, property, and equipment and intangible assets. So that was kind of the top half of the balance sheet. And this course is really focusing on liability and equity topics. So some of the big topics that we're going to be talking about are going to be current liabilities, and then long-term liabilities, primarily long-term debt. We're going to talk about how you account for gift cards and loyalty programs. Then we're going to talk about stockholders' equity, and then earnings per share and dilutive securities. We'll also spend a lot of time, this will be during week 4, talking about the statement of cash flows and actually how you put together a statement of cash flows. And then we'll get into accounting for income taxes and investments. So when a company has excess cash and they make a decision to invest in other companies or invest in debt securities, we'll talk about that. And then we'll also be spending time talking about revenue recognition, pensions and post-retirement benefits, and leases. And the asterisks by revenue recognition and leases are because in the last 2 years, there have been major new accounting pronouncements that have come out regarding those two topics. So for revenue recognition, you may be familiar with ASC 606, and that was effective for public companies starting on January 1st of 2018. And then the new lease standard was effective for public companies starting on 1/1/2019. And so what we'll do is we'll talk about what the new standards are and how you account for transactions under these new standards. Both of these standards, the purposes of having new standards were so that they were more closely aligned with international accounting standards, or IFRS. So next I want to spend just a couple of minutes kind of going over the syllabus with you. And as most of you probably have recently taken Accounting 310, the syllabus kind of organization and structure is very similar. So all of the materials that you will be doing are going to be available to you online. One of the things that may be different from whoever you took your Accounting 310 class from is that I will actually post online lectures for you to listen to that kind of go over the major points and concepts that I want you to learn and I want you to make sure that you understand. And accompanying those lectures will be slide decks similar to what you're seeing right now. And then in those slide decks, we'll also go through sample problems, and those sample problems then will help you to do your homework. You'll also have usually 1, sometimes 2, discussion forums to do per week, and those discussion forums are going to be key to your company analysis for your SEC 10K project. You'll also have homework to complete. Several homework problems will be assigned each week to sort of gauge whether or not you understand the concepts that are covered in that weekly material. There will be 2 quizzes throughout the semester and then a comprehensive final exam, and then you'll have a couple of papers to complete, and we'll go through those in more detail in just a few minutes. In terms of how the course is graded, there are 5 components. Your quizzes or comprehensive final exam make up 50% of your overall grade. Homework will make up an additional 10%. Your SEC 10K paper and project will be 15%. Your discussion forums will be another 10%, and then the remaining 15% will be for your IFRS report. So now I'm going to kind of break down each of those various components in a little bit more detail. So, as I mentioned, you'll have 2 quizzes and a comprehensive final exam. Your first quiz will be due at the end of week 3 and will cover the first 2 weeks of material. Your second quiz will be due at the end of week 5 and will cover weeks 3 and 4 for material. And then your final exam will be due at the end of week 8. And while it is comprehensive, it will be more heavily weighted towards the materials from weeks 5, 6, and 7 because that has been untested at this point. Your assessments will include some multiple choice questions, some short answer questions, some workout problems, and we'll talk more about what you can expect for your first quiz in a future announcement. Next up is homework. Multiple problems will be assigned every week. The purpose of the homework is really meant to reinforce the practice problems that are completed in class and to allow you an opportunity to kind of gauge whether or not you understand the material before we get to the assessment. So you'll notice that while homework only comprises 10% of your overall grade, and it will take, a substantial amount of time to complete, it really is meant to kind of give you a preview of whether or not you are prepared for the quizzes and the final exam, which do comprise half of your overall grade. I do not accept late homework. Homework is always due on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, I recognize that things come up, that there are, situations that may be unforeseen or that you may, just get behind for whatever reason. And so at the end of the semester, I will drop your lowest score, so that will not impact your final overall grade. The other thing that is very important and that every semester students have problems with is that they think they've submitted their homework and it turns out they actually haven't. So make sure that you're checking your email and that you received a confirmation that you uploaded your homework submission. The second note that I also just want to make is to make sure that when you do submit your homework that you're submitting the right file, because every semester, at least a couple of times, I have students who end up submitting the wrong assignment. So, double check, make sure that what you're submitting is really what you intended to submit. Oops. The ACCT 10K paper and project. So this is another assignment that you would have seen in the Accounting 310 class, and it is a really great project because what it really does is provides a link between topics that we've covered in class and their practical application to financial information of actual companies. There's 2 components to this assignment, a paper and a PowerPoint deck, and your requirements are to pick a Fortune 500 company. So unlike Accounting 310, when you were supposed to pick a company that had inventory and accounts receivable, that is not a requirement that I have for the Accounting 311 course because we're not talking about those concepts, so it's not as important that your company have those. The only other thing to note is that you do need to pick a company that is different than what you did your Accounting 310 project on. So there are a multitude of project resources available to you within the syllabus section of LEO. And once I've gone through these slides, I will be giving you a quick tutorial of LEO, and I will show you where some of these materials are. Perhaps one of the most helpful tools is that I've actually written a sample paper for a company. I actually picked Hormel Foods, and so that's going to be a really great kind of guideline for you to kind of see what I'm looking for. The discussion forums, there'll be at least one each week, and primarily they will relate to the SEC 10K project. My biggest piece of advice for you is that if you spend the time and the effort doing these weekly discussion posts, it will basically help you write your paper for you. So if done correctly, you literally can copy and paste your discussion forum posts together, add a few segues in, write an introduction and a conclusion, and your paper is done. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, I've written a sample SEC 10K paper. I've also written sample discussion posts on Hormel Foods to give you some ideas of what I'm looking for and what a good post is. In addition to writing about your own post, you will also be required to respond to the post of at least one other classmate. And then finally, there are going to be, especially near the end of the semester, a couple of discussion forum questions or posts that you need to do that don't pertain to the SEC 10K project. And then finally, you have a second paper requirement, which is kind of an IFRS US GAAP report. And the purpose of this is to take one of the current projects that IFRS is being worked on and to kind of dig a little deeper into understanding how it came about, what the current status is, how it compares to, a US GAAP standard, what are some of the pros and cons of this new standard, what's the timeline for implementation, and what has been some of the feedback from stakeholders. Are they in favor of this new proposal? Are they against it? Etc. And so we will also spend a little bit more time discussing this project in a future announcement. But I just also wanted to point out that the project requirements are under the syllabus section called IFRS Report. And then lastly, in terms of course resources, there are a multitude of course resources that are available for you. First and foremost is the Roger CPA Review website, and so that is where you can see sample posts. Not sample posts. That is where you can see, materials. You can see sample questions. The Leo course website also has a lot of information. There is an Introduction to Financial Accounting textbook that is available to you. I mentioned before I'm going to post weekly slides. And then there's also information on whether you would like to purchase a hard copy version of the textbook. That is completely optional. I do have a large number of students, though, who oftentimes want to have a hard copy resource that has a lot of information about financial accounting because that's the field that they're going into. However, I would like to point out that 95% of the material that you will be tested on will be contained within these weekly lecture slides. So what I've really done is I've kind of taken the information that's presented in a financial accounting textbook, and I've kind of bullet pointed the major components, the pieces that are really important. I've added some examples, and then I've also coupled that with showing you kind of how that translates into the real world with articles and excerpts from a variety of different companies, 10Ks or 10Qs. So I fully believe, and this has been proven in the past with former students, that you can be very successful in this class if you spend the majority of your time focusing on my lectures and focusing on the slide decks that I provide to you. Now to finish up this discussion, I'm going to take you on a quick look around Leo just to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of where resources are available. So this is Leo. Your version is probably going to look a little bit different because I have the instructor version. But one of the things I first want to point out is all of the weeks have been labeled. The weeks start on a Monday and end on a Sunday. And as I mentioned, Sunday ends at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The other thing that you will also notice is if you go to the course schedule, so I've also put the due dates for all of your assignments. I've put the dates in so that you can easily follow along in terms of what exactly it is that you need to have completed by Sunday evening of each week. Now if we go to the content section, actually I'm going to go to the syllabus section. So there's a lot of information in the syllabus section. Not only is the syllabus listed here, but a lot of other good resources are available to you. So I'm first going to scroll down to the bottom, and this is where I mentioned in the earlier slides that there's a section on the SEC 10K project resources. So that gives you the description of the project and how you should format it in terms of margins and single spacing versus double spacing and font size and all of that. And then I also mentioned that there is a sample paper, so you'll find that here. And then there's also a file, and it's called the Bad, Better, Best Discussion Post Example. And so what this basically is this is me sort of responding to a discussion post question that's been posed, and I'm giving you 3 versions of an answer. One that I consider to be a bad post, one that's a better post, and then what the best post would be. And you'll notice that as you go along and get into the better and the best post, that the analysis is much stronger, and there's a lot more information that's provided in those posts. So make sure you check that out. Okay, so then the only other thing that I kind of want to point out is 2 things actually. So I mentioned earlier that there was a textbook that you could buy, and there's also a version online that you can take a look at. So within the syllabus section, what I wanted to show was the information about whether or not you wanted to purchase a textbook is included in this intermediate textbook recommendation KESO. The other alternative that you have is there is an Introduction to Financial Accounting textbook, and that is this right here. And so what you can do is if you click on this link, it will actually open up the entire textbook. And then what you'll also find is in each of the week's learning resources, it will tell you which chapters of this book correspond to the chapters that we're covering for that potential week. And then finally, I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor for what each of the weeks look like. So I'm going to go to week 1. So for week 1, what you'll see is it'll kind of give you an overall understanding of what we're covering for the week. And then here's where it'll tell you which sections with regards to the Rogers CPA review pertain to our materials for the week, and then which chapters out of that Introduction to Financial Accounting textbook that I just showed you also pertain. And then down below it will tell you for the Rogers CPA section kind of how long each of these various lectures are. And my recommendation is, I know everyone is time strapped and you only have enough time, to spend so many hours, would be first and foremost to listen to my lecture slides and go through my slide deck. And then if there's areas that you're still a little confused upon, I would then go to the Rogers CPA site, and I would specifically make sure that I'm reviewing those particular sections in a little bit more detail to get someone else's kind of perspective or explanation of it. And we move then down to the bottom, you will see sort of what some of your assignments are for that given week. So in week 1, you're going to introduce yourself to the class. There's an activity for you to locate learning resources to kind of play around in the site a little bit more, see what resources are available, and comment on which resource or resources you think will be most valuable. You're going to have to do a discussion post picking your SEC 10K company, and then you're also going to have homework to do. So the first homework, this discussion topic, is really if you have questions about homework that you want to ask me or you want to ask a fellow classmate about, that's where you'll do it here. This forum is really meant not to get help on the actual questions themselves, but to get clarity on what the question's asking for, where there might be some resources available to help you understand what the question's asking, or a sample that we went over in the lecture slides that you could use as a basis for helping you do the homework. Homework is on your own. It is not a collaborative effort, but this is kind of a place where we'll give some hints and tricks and things like that. And then below that is actually where you will find your first homework assignment, and then there'll be a Dropbox for you to submit that homework assignment. So then you'll just notice that there's just it goes down depending on the week in terms of what you should be doing. This is also where I will be posting the weekly slide decks and then a link to my lecture. I just haven't posted any of those just yet, so that's why you don't see them there. So I hope this was helpful to kind of give you a little bit of overview of the course, where some of resources are in Leo, and I'll be back in touch with you guys for the week 1 course material in just a little bit.